Hello, Daphne here with another video for you. This one's titled, The College I Loved and How I Met My Husband. I can tell you in no uncertain terms that the person you are looking at was definitely not a student. I was not into math, history, the Romance languages, Latin, all the other things, all the subjects that I was taught in boarding school. I had to go to boarding school because my parents were in the American Foreign Service overseas. So I went to National Cathedral School in Washington, D.C., where I was a boarding student. And I was far from being a student. My interest was in athletics. I loved field hockey. I loved lacrosse and basketball. And to this day, I hold the record for the most points in a basketball game. But the rules were a little different then. You couldn't cross the center line, so being a forward, I got to shoot more. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. So anyway, I managed to graduate from National Cathedral School. That was a miracle. School just did not agree with me. I just was not interested in the subject matter. I thought to myself, why does anybody need to know about Napoleon? Curious question, but ironically, many years later, I was at a cocktail party when people started talking about Napoleon, when the light bulb finally went off in my head, and I realized that a general knowledge of what had happened in the history of the world was probably not a bad thing to know. But anyway, at the time, those type of subjects were of zero interest to me. So I struggled, and I got passing grades, but that was about it. I was very, very fortunate to be accepted at Bennett College in Millbrook, New York, a 2-year liberal arts college for girls that didn't make it into Smith, Wellesley, and the really fancy girls' schools that only took the brightest students. But the Bennett girls were a fabulous group of girls. They were smart in their own way. Many of them went on to be very, very successful entrepreneurs, but just not in the traditional sense, with a Harvard or Yale or one of the degrees from a fancy school. One thing Bennett girls were known for, and that was we knew how to have a good time. And did we ever? On the weekends, many, many guys from Dartmouth, Yale, Princeton, all came to Bennett because of our reputation for having a good time. So we got a chance to meet a lot of different men and never passed up a chance to kick up our heels. Studying, for me, at Bennett was actually a treat because I had the pleasure of learning costume design, interior design, and my favorite was history of art. And those subjects so appealed to me that studying was a pleasure, believe it or not. But on the weekends, it was time to live it up. So as the boys descended on Bennett College, they picked us out from formals or socials or whatever, and we had a grand old time. Now, one Saturday night, I had a date with a guy, I believe from Williams. And by the time it was late in the evening, my boredom level had increased to the max. So when he and the other people that were with us wanted to stop for a nightcap, I decided to stay in the car in hopes that that would shorten up the time period that my friends were in the bar. So I stayed in the car. My date went inside, and as luck would have it, he talked to a gentleman who asked him, "Where in the world is your date?" He said begrudgingly, "Well, she didn't want to come in." So off this man went out to the car, and believe it or not, he convinced me to come in. And that was the man that I would eventually marry, believe it or not. Talk about a coincidence. Anyway, after that night, we were thick and thin. I was invited up to Yale. He came down to Bennett on weekends, and I fell madly in love. He was the apple of my eye. I just had the best time. I just loved every minute with him. So we got married, and all of my friends from Bennett and all his friends from Yale attended a beautiful wedding on the main line of Philadelphia. So over the next 9 years, because we were still very young. Well, first of all, we were married before his senior year at Yale. And then the very next year, I had my first child. And 3 children came after that. And by the time I was 29, we had had four kids. But unfortunately for me, because I never had a chance to really grow up, I went from my father taking care of me to my husband taking care of me. And I, at the age of early 30s, wanted to kick up my heels. And so very unfortunately, I fell out of love with my husband. That was just a tragedy for me. I couldn't believe it. How could I have loved this man so much for so many years, so genuinely loved him, and now the process had started of me falling out of love. Oh, it was a tragedy for me. But anyway, that's what happened, and we got divorced. But, Bennett College had a reputation for a ring by spring, or your money back. Well, I got my ring by spring, and I got a wonderful husband for many years and 4 beautiful children. So that is my story about my love of Bennett College and how I met my husband. Hope you enjoyed it. It was really something, well, I should say it was a very, very special time in my life.